Stacey Martin, Head of Science here at Edrolo. You and some of your colleagues have just produced a new report looking at why some science students consistently outperform peers in VCE results. Can you tell us a little bit about that report and why teachers and students should pay attention to the findings?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So we looked at users on our platform in VCE sciences, so psychology, biology, chemistry, and physics. And what we found is part of actually a larger report. So the first one is more about student behaviour, but we did find teacher engagement on the platform is strongly correlated with student success. In terms of behaviours, what we found is high achieving students actually engage more. So students who scored a study score of 40 plus completed nearly double the number of questions than those who achieved study scores of under 40. We also found that accuracy matters as well. So students who scored 40 plus had higher accuracy rates on Edrolo auto-marked questions. And this was consistent across all the topics with about a 10% gap of accuracy between those that had above 40 and below 40.
Amazing. We'll talk about the data in a second and the massive data set this is based on, but I just wanted to dig into one of the things I thought was most interesting in the report, which is that concept of strategic practice. Can you talk a little bit about what that is in kind of like practical terms?
Yeah, sure. So we obviously have videos on our platform as well as questions. And what we found is those that achieved study scores of 40 plus were watching roughly 10% more videos. But where the actual difference seemed to be made was doing the questions. And so they're doing a lot more practice questions. They're a lot more active revision, I would say. And it's when they're doing them as well. So we could actually see patterns to this, and it shows kind of when they're doing the practice, and there's a consistency and a level of motivation throughout the year with these students who are achieving 40 plus, which was really exciting. So it wasn't just about the practice, but doing the right kind of practice, not that kind of just watching videos, but applying their knowledge and using our questions that mimic VCEE questions. So it helps give confidence, strengthens the recall, and go in feeling strong to your exams, which was really promising to see.
And what every teacher and every student basically wants, right, when they hit the end of the year. Let's talk now about the data set, because it is a big data set. And I think it's really important for people watching or listening to this just to give that sense of credibility and validity to what we're seeing here. So can you talk us through the kind of the data that you and the team have analysed?
Yeah, so there was 37,500 VCE students enrolled in Year 12 biology, chemistry, physics, and psychology in 2024. And these students completed thousands of questions in Edrolo. And we were able to look at the results of the 40 plus using the VCEE honour roll. So students who achieve a study score of 40 plus can actually be identified and published if they choose to. There's about 15% who choose not to. But we were able to sort of benchmark using the published results and looking at what we found as well as a direct comparison between top performing students and their peers.
It's a massive data set. I think that should give people kind of confidence in terms of what we're looking at here. 37,500 students across 4 subjects across the year, then benchmarked against that VCEE data, as you said. You looked at questions completed by students who scored 40 plus and those who didn't.
Yeah, so what we found is that over the course of a year, the students who achieved 40 plus were doing a lot more questions. But from a practical nature, that sort of, I'll use chemistry as an example. They have 12 chapters in the book. 40 plus scorers completed roughly 48.6 questions per chapter on average, while lower scorers, they completed just 32.5. So if we look at that over the course of a year, those chemistry students who are achieving 40 plus are exposed to about 50% more questions over the entire year. And so more practice is linked with higher accuracy, reinforcing that link between engagement and achievement. And I guess this suggests that it's not just natural ability that makes the difference, it really is that practice makes perfect, or the right practice makes perfect.
And we really see that in the heat maps as well that are in the report. And it was another thing that I found really interesting looking at, because the heat maps essentially show what your describing there, which is the students, the 37,500 students on the Edrolo platform across the year, and where they are engaging and the depth of that engagement, but also like how consistent that is. So as people are looking at these heat maps, and there's one for each of the 4 subjects, what are they showing, and what are they revealing to us?
Yeah, so they have, I guess, the chronological order of the chapters down the horizontal axis, and then the vertical axis is the weeks. And we split them between those that achieve 40 plus and below 40. And the patterns are really interesting, and they're also mirrored in every subject that we saw. So those that achieve 40 plus have a consistent approach throughout the year. They seem to be completing the questions at the time that they're studying it and persisting with those topics. So the heat maps actually show like a darker color to show the concentration or the extra volume of questions. So they're almost persisting with it to achieve a level of mastery is what it looks like. And this is kind of seen by the accuracy that we see in this group as well. It shows that when they completed these practice questions, they're doing a lot more of them, and then they move on to the next one, and they continue this pattern throughout the year. Whereas with lower scoring students, it looks like they tend to lose motivation. So some of them will start out kind of similar, but by the middle of the year, the heat maps lose the structure. They seem to be doing questions from all topics and a lot less of them. And so they seem far more kind of reactive than proactive, which we see in the 40 plus groups. And then because we can kind of look at the achievement, the success, it reinforces what we know about spaced learning, that these gradual structured practice leads to better retention and deeper understanding.
Yeah, you can really see that depth of practice and consistency in the 40 plus students, and just how strong that trend is throughout the year. You also looked at consuming or watching the video lessons, which obviously are a big part of the Edrolo system, compared to completing questions. What did that show? You've touched on it briefly, but can you dive into that a bit more?
Yeah, so I think a lot of students revise by watching or reading their notes, and it's just what students do. But what we could see is that it didn't strongly correlate with high scores. So 40 plus students watched about 10% more video content than those that achieved lower than 40. But the real results came from doing 29% more exam style questions and 8.8% more practice questions. And so this suggests that the passive watching the videos, reading your notes is just not enough. They really need to be applying that knowledge and applying it to, I guess, simulate exam questions to really get that confidence and attempt those questions.
And I love that you and the team have done this for multiple subjects, including maths, which isn't in this report. We're focused on science, but one of our maths colleagues showed her year 12 son and says that he's now religiously doing questions as a way to just build that practice. And I think it really speaks to, obviously, video lessons and video content can be super useful, as you said, to revise or fill gaps. But really that difference between, say, engagement or using revision with videos versus very practical, applied revision using questions that comes through really clearly in the data. How we've touched on the size of this data set. How trustworthy is this data? Like, how reliable is it?
Yeah, so we wanted to make sure, I guess, that it was our questions that were having this effect in the 40 plus scorers and having that practice. So we looked at 3 different groups within our platform, and we looked at those that didn't achieve a 40 plus in any of their subjects, those that achieved a 40 plus in one or more of their subjects, and then those, we looked at the data of where they didn't actually achieve a 40 plus, so the same student. And when you see the difference between one particular student in one subject getting a 40 plus, but not in another, that child has the same ability, but they're doing a lot more practice where they achieve their 40 plus than the other one. So that tells us it's not necessarily the external factors that can go into this. So the school, the teacher, the class, the ability, they will all have an influence, but really it's about that practice.
What are the implications for a teacher seeing this, do you think? How would you use it if you were back in the classroom teaching biology as you did?
Yeah, well, the heat maps, like as you said, so our colleague, she showed the heat maps to her son, and this is what works. And I think we tell kids all the time that practice makes perfect and you need to be able to apply your knowledge. But to see the data support that and how clear it is, I think that's really powerful. So for teachers, I think we want to be encouraging that active practice, setting structured, regular question based tasks rather than just relying on self directed students. This wasn't sort of published in this report, but the more active the teacher is as well, that does correlate. I think there's an accountability there that kind of keeps students on track. And motivation is the other thing. So if we can kind of gamify that, maybe set some kind of rewards or something, some incentives to keep kids pursuing that persistence throughout the year, I think that could have some really good outcomes for students.
For students themselves, if there are students listening or watching this wanting to kind of get closer to a 40 plus perfect score?
Yeah, I think start early. So you don't want to leave practice until the exam period. You want to be mastering the content as you move through it. Focusing on accuracy, so reviewing incorrect answers and learning from your mistakes. And then using structured questions, not just the summary notes or the videos, but actually applying that knowledge to the exam style questions as much as possible.
Good advice for students and teachers, and worth checking out the report. Thank you so much, Stacey.
Terrific. Thank you.